Hello everyone, this is Awab Akim and today we're going to solve the pre-release material of October-November 2020, paper 22. Okay, this is the same for IGCSE Computer Science and for the O-level Computer Science 2210 code as well. They are pretty much the same except with minor differences in the grading. If we look at the content of the pre-release material, it's actually simple. What we have to do is we have to create a program that will get input for all of these things, just sum up their prices and show what the user has bought. So we have to create a very basic version of a shopping cart that you see in your online stores. Okay, it has three tasks as usual. So in the first one, you have to allow the user to take in to input one case, one RAM, and one main hard disk. Okay, in second, you have to take input for additional items. Okay, so the additional items are the solid state drive, your second hard disk, optical drive, and operating system. And in the third one, you just have to keep a counter of all the additional items bought and you have to give discount accordingly. So you need to remember one thing. By default, we are going to cost the user. Okay, so every computer sold includes a basic set of component costing $200, and then you have to add the additional amount of items. So whatever the user buys, we are going to charge them for that. Please note one thing, you have to allow only one case, one RAM, and one main hard disk drive. So we are going to give the user all the options, whether for A1, A2 for the case or B1, B2 RAMs, and depending on their description, prices, whatever the user buys, but it has to be only one. All right. So if we look at the pseudocode, before we go to the pseudocode, let me show you the Python code that I've written. By the way, the Python code is shared in the Google Drive folder. The link is in the description and in the comments as well. It's inside the pre-release material solutions. The pre-release document is there as well. And there's this resource, Python cheat sheet, which comes very, um, you know, is very beneficial for all of you. Basically, it is a conversion of pseudocode to Python and vice versa. I created this to remove any sorts of difficulties in this topic. So you can use it for your convenience. And then there are P1 notes as well for theory. If you want to revise, you can use them as well. Now, if I run the code for Python, okay, one more thing. Until and unless you do not understand the pseudocode that I've written and the video, you are not going to understand the Python code. So it is pretty much useless if you just try to run my code and make changes. Okay, learning how it's working is the actual point of this video, not just cramming the code. It won't be of any use. So if I run the code, it gives me the options. For all that's written, it's simply pasted in the program. So I say I want to buy the tower, so I'll press 2. Then I have the RAM available. I'll buy B1 8 GB RAM, and then I'll buy the C3 4 TB hard drive. So in output it tells me that I bought a case, a RAM, and a main HDD. Then it tells me the specific descriptions, okay, as they are shown, and then their final prices. So I bought 2, that's 150. Then I bought 79, and then I bought 129. So when I add all these, it gives me the output of 559.98. In the output, I have also added $200. Okay, so you can see the basic set price is equal to $200. Why? Because it says so in the program that every computer includes a basic set of costing $200, and then these are all the additional items. All right, and it's also written that as well as the basic components, every computer must include these 3 things. So this is basically the task 1. Now without any further ado, let's begin task 1, the pseudocode. You need to keep one thing in mind for this type of question. So if you read the statement, says use arrays to store items, descriptions, etc., and calculate the total price. Okay, I'm closing the Python. Okay, Python command prompt. Okay, so if you look at this, I've created a simple list or array, whatever you want to call it. In pseudocode, we call it an array. Okay, in Python, that's a list. So I just save the name of the items accordingly in the list. So you have case on 0th index, RAM at 1st index, main HDD, and so on and so forth. Then what I did, okay, if you have multiple items that are relevant, okay, so you always create multiple lists and you keep track of their indices. What do I mean by that? So let's see, I have a case that is A1. So at 0th index of the item code array, I save A1 and then I create another array called cases description. And on its 0th index, I save compact. And then I create a cases price array, and on its 0th index, I save $75. Where do I get this information? I'm getting it all from this inventory table that's given in the original document. So do you see the pattern here? On the list of items, 0th index, I have case. On A1, I have a type of the case, 0th index, and then on the 0th index of the other array, I have its description, and on the cases price, 0th index, I have the price. So for same index, you're getting the relevant information of one item. So if I go to RAM is at the first index in this list. You can make this list if you want, or you can just simply print their names. It's not necessary, okay? But all of these things below are very important. You can see I assigned them string, real, integer, all these data types I assume. String is for, alphabets. Real is for float numbers, or, the decimal numbers. And integer is for whole numbers. So if I go to RAM again, every index corresponds to the relevant entry in the other array. So if the item code is B1 in 0th index of item code, then the 0th index corresponds to 8 GB. Why? Because it here says B1 is 8 GB, and then it's priced at 80 or $79.9. Okay, so all of these are in order. So this is how you get input or output for the relevant items. Okay, and by saving them in multiple arrays, in order to keep them in a very ordered form, in a proper structure. All right. So here I have just created the inventory as per the table, and some items might be missing. I'm just I think second hardest drive. Okay, I have all the items, but I would be only showing it for a small subset. Okay, this is just for example. Now if we go below, here are some further variables that I've initialized and declared. So I have an empty string array that is for the description of shopping cart. That would be saving the descriptions of all the items that you buy, the names and prices. They are all empty. These are integers for, this is for total price. By the way, this should be a float. Sorry, real. Okay, float is in Python. Then I have an index counter that will be incrementing item option that the user selects, and user reply main. You'll see what they mean. So in first line, I say that print main items available, and then I say repeat until. Okay, you need to keep one thing in mind. There is no repeat until in Python. So if you'll compare my Python code and my pseudocode, they would have a bit different logic. Okay, so please don't get confused. If you understand the pseudocode, you can recreate it in any language. Okay, so my focus won't be on Python, but on the pseudocode. So I say repeat, print all of these first. Okay, what does this mean? So case item code. So if you go to case item code array, it just prints all the item codes available. Okay, so that user can see what they want, and then print the cases description. It would print the description accordingly, compact or tower, and so on and so forth. This repeats for all of the items, then their prices. And then I ask the user enter 1 or 2 to select the respective case, and then I take input in the variable called item option. Okay, so far so simple. Now until and unless the user selects option 1 or 2, this loop would keep on repeating. Why? Because we do not want the user to enter anything besides 1 or 2. That's an error, right? So I've also commented check to take just to stop taking input. Okay, so this is how it's working. It repeats until user enters 1 or 2. So based on that, we go on to the next line. Okay, so this is the main focus of task 1. Now I made 3 empty arrays above, right, for the description of the shopping cart, the names, and the price. So let's say the user, whatever he buys, the RAM or HDD, you are going to save that in the array. How do you do that? Index counter is initially set to 0. So what we're doing is that we're saving on the 0th index of name shopping cart, we are saving list item 0. Now what is a list item 0? It is nothing but your case. Okay, first index is RAM, second index is main HDD, so on and so forth. If you think you will get confused here, so instead of writing this, just save it as RAM. Okay, it's up to you. Just save it, directly input the item name. But we always want to do everything programmatically. Okay. All right. Now in the next line, sorry. Okay, we were here. So this should be case, not RAM. RAM is the next step. All right. What is happening in this line? So in this line, we want to save the description of whatever the user bought. Okay, so let's say user bought A2. So what is the description of A2? We are going to get that from the second index or of the cases description array, right? Now the thing is, in Python the indices start from 0. Okay, so this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and so on. Okay, not from 1. So keeping that in mind, you have to subtract 1 from the item option. Why? Let's say the user enters 2. So we said 2 would correspond to the relevant case. Okay, but if you go to the array, yes, the length is 2, right? But our index starts from 0. So this is technically 0 and this is technically 1. So if we enter 2, there is no element here, right? There is no third element. So 0, 1, 2. So this 2 corresponds to actually the third element in the array because our array starts from 0. So to ensure that the numbering remains the same, we subtract 1 so that in our array it is referenced to the second element or the first index. So when I do item option -1, so let's say the user entered 2. So when I do 2 minus 1, it corresponds to the first index of cases description, which becomes A2 because we are starting from 0. So this is just a small technicality that you have to keep in mind. So what am I doing? I'm just assigning the cases description of whatever item the user selected to the shopping cart's description. I'm just saving it inside the shopping cart at the index counter. So far the index counter is 0. So if you look at like this, so we are saving at 0th index the element name, its description, and then finally its price. Okay. Once we have done that, we have to increment the counter. Why? Because user has to buy 3 things in the first step. He has to buy the case, the RAM, and the HDD, right? So once the user buys that, we have to increment the counter so that next time whatever he buys, it goes to the first index or the next index, whatever the number is, right? I hope you all understand this simple point. So we have to increment. Why? So we have to go to the next index or the next element or the next position of the array to fill in the next available items. So I'll change them back to the variables. All right. If you don't increment this, what would happen? It would keep on overwriting at the 0th index. So by the end of the program, it would have only bought the last index items. Okay. It would overwrite the rest of them. So moving on. By the way, if you don't know, index counter is equal to index counter plus 1 essentially means to increment. So let's say the index counter is initially 0. So 0 plus 1 is 1, right? So the new value of index counter would be 1. So this is how you increment in pseudocode. These are the very basics. Now I'm repeating the very same thing for RAM, so I'm not really going to explain it. So again, since it has 3 options, RAM has 3 options, right? So I'll, instead of item option 1 or 2, I also add 3. And then since I've already incremented the index counter, I just put the values relevant. Okay. Now see this. Previously we said cases description, cases price. Now here we say RAM description and RAM price because we are talking about RAM. So we have to reference the relevant array. And then we again index counter is incremented by 1. And finally, here index counter is incremented by 1. Why? So we have to go to the next element. So far the user has bought 2 items, right? Now we add the third and final item, that is main HDD. Again, user does the same thing. here you can see it is referencing to list items 1. Now what is that list items index 1? You'll see it's RAM, and then list item number 2, index 2, it is main HDD. So again, it's up to you. Either you print this name of the item directly here, or you reference it from the array. All right, so this is done. So far, so simple, right? Now, in the final step, what the question asks is you have to calculate the price. Okay, so far what we've done is we have stored the price of every item in the price shopping cart. Now you have to sum all the values in the array. How do you do that? So if I run the Python program again, so I'm just going to select the first options. So see this, this is basically in pseudocode. We are saving all the prices in the price shopping cart array. So you have 75, 79, and 49. Now you're going to sum them and you'll get the output. Okay, how do you sum in pseudocode for an array? That is different. In Python, it's done very simply. You just literally write sum the list. Okay, that's it. But it's not so simple in pseudocode. For that, you have to actually write a for loop. The for loop is going to run from 0th index to the length of the price shopping cart minus 1. Why am I doing minus 1? Again, for the same reason. Let's say the shopping cart has 3 elements. Okay, so if I say 0 to 3, now count on your fingers. It will run for 0, 1, 2, 3. That runs actually 4 times. Okay, but our array only has 3 items. So whenever we go till length times, we always subtract 1 to make sure that it stays within the index range. Again, the index starts from 0. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind. Now what am I doing here? Every time I'm saying total price is equal to total price plus price index cart I. Okay, this shouldn't be I, this should be index. Let me make the change in all the, sorry about the mistake. The variables must be correctly referenced. All right, so what's going to happen now? Initially, total price is equal to 0. 0 plus price shopping cart index. So what is that 0th index of shopping cart? For here, I'll go to the actual execution of the program. So what is the 0th index of the price array? It is 75. So I will add 75. And what is the new value of total price? It is actually 75, right? So I'll just write total price. This is just the demonstration of the pseudocode. Okay, so this is how it's working. 0 plus 75. All right, next time the loop goes to next index. So from 0 we go to 1 to the first index. Now what is at the first index of the price array? It's 79.99. So what was at the previous, so what was the previous value of total price? It was 0 plus 75, that was 75, right? So this time, instead of 0, here you have 75. And what is saved at the first index of price shopping cart? That is 79.99. If you add them together, what do you get? Now, since we went to the next index, so from 1 it went to 2. Now, what is at the last index or the second index? It's 49.99. So 49.99, you'll get it here. And you'll add them, and whatever the sum is, it would be calculated. Now, when you go to the next index, you said to go till the length, right? So the length was already 2 in our case. So length is initially 1, 2, 3 elements, and since we did -1, so it runs till 2. So the loop is going to finally end now, right? And then we end for, and then we go to this line. So until and unless the loop completes, you do not exit the loop, whether it's a for loop or whether it's a while loop. So I'm just reverting it. So we got the total, right? In our case, whatever the total is. Now, since the question said that you have to add $200 to whatever the user buys, this, okay? So I set the basic price to 200, and then I added the total price to basic price. We got the total price from the for loop by adding all the items one by one and summing them in the total price. And in the last step, I am just printing the values on the screen, like here you can see, okay? And this would output it correctly. So this is your task one, simple enough. Now if you go to task two, so the description of task two is, we have to allow the user to choose the additional items, okay? So again, you have to store the items and you have to print their description. You know, this is just an extension of task one. So in task one, we were up till here, right? Now we have to add these additional items into our shopping cart. But there is a small thing that you have to notice. It says allow the users to choose whether to purchase any items or not. So first you have to ask the user yes or no. If they say yes, then you have to allow them which items. So once the user has selected these three, you ask, do you want to buy any of these? If the user says yes, then you have to give option for all four of these items, okay? So the user can choose one by one. And if the user says no, then you are simply going to print the shopping cart relevant details, okay? So in task two, the changes that we have to make. Now see this. This is exactly the same as task one, okay? All of the code, I literally copy pasted it. Now if you look afterwards, I have a repeat until. So first of all, I ask the user, do you want to buy additional items? By the way, you have to do it for all four items. I'm only doing it for two, okay? Again, this is for example purposes. So you ask the user, do you want to buy an item, additional item, yes or no? If the user items one, I'm saying one for yes or zero for no. So let's first check for zero. If the user says zero, then you end the repeat until loop, right? That's it. So repeat until is coming in handy here. Now, if the user enters one, you have to give the options, okay? So first you have to say, enter one for SSD, enter two for operating system. Now, if you are giving other options, you say enter three for hard disk drive and four for optical drive, whatever order you want. Then the user inputs its reply in user reply main variable. If it is equal to one, that means the user selected SSD. Now again, I put this inside the repeat until loop, just as we did in task one, okay? The loop would keep on repeating until the user selects a proper option of one or two. And again, I have already inputted the information in the relevant areas. So if you go to SSD description above in the declaration, you'll find it here. So I've already declared their descriptions, their item codes, and their prices. So for SSD, for the HDD, for optical drive, and for operating system. So we are literally going to reference them by their names and repeat the same thing as we did in task one. All right. Now, as soon as the user selects the SSD, you are again going to repeat the thing that we did in task one. You are going to input, these should not be equal signs, by the way, they should be the arrows. We do not use equals in the pseudocode. So just ignore this mistake from now on, otherwise I'll have to make more changes. So, you know, just ignore them, right? So what we did in the task one, we're going to repeat here. So you are going to reference the list of items index 3. So what is that index 3 of list of items? You see 0, 1, 2, 3, you get SSD. And then you are subtracting item option with 1. Why? Again, the same reason, because we are starting our index from 0. So if the option is selected 2, we don't have a 2 in, we don't have the second index in our array. It's only 0th index or first index. So we subtract 1. And then we input it at description shopping cart, and same for the SSD price that is inputted at the price of the shopping cart array. And then we do index counter plus 1. Why? Because we have again added an item in our array. Now to save the next item, we have to go to the next element. You can see this code is indented. By indentation, I mean that whatever if you're using, its relevant code should be indented inside of it. Okay, so this code is inside this if, and this if else if is in line with this. You can see the lines are already formed by the notepad++. Okay. So else if. So if the reply is not 1, so if user does not want to buy SSD, he or she wants to buy operating system. So if he or she wants to buy operating system, you give the relevant details, OS available, respective description, respective prices. Again, the same thing here, you refer to the operating system arrays, and you repeat the same thing. You increment the index counter, you end if. End if for this if and else if, and then you end if for this primary if, okay, the super if that you are using, and repeat until ends as soon as the user enters 0. Now, again, repeating the same thing for the for loop. What you're going to do is you are going to start from 0, go till the length of shopping cart -1, and every time you are getting the index one element from the list, and then you are adding it, okay, to the total price. So if I run the program for task 2, so I'm just going to enter relevant random, okay. So it says, do you want to buy SSD or operating system? If I say no, it just ends the program and outputs whatever I bought. Now if I run the program again, and instead I enter 1 this time, so it allows me, do you want to buy SSD or operating system? I buy operating system, and then, sorry, the SSD. I enter the option. Then again it asks me, do you want to buy an operating system or an SSD? This time I say yes, I want to buy, and this time I go for the OS. I buy the professional, and you can repeat this as much uh, as you want, and then I say no, I don't want anything else. So you see, if I print this, it is outputting the complete array. Now I bought the SSD and operating system, so they are in the array. They weren't there in before, right? So you have their complete prices and the total additional prices added. So this is how the pseudocode of this is working, and then you are simply printing the array by before finding the total, after finding the total, right? How do I find the total? I just add it to the basic set price, that is $200, and total price I already have it from this loop. Now the third and final task, that is simply an extension of task 2. It says you have to keep track of the user's count of additional items bought. If the user bought only one additional item, you give 5% discount, and if the user bought 2 or more, you have to give 10% discount. That's it, literally it. So what do we have to do to keep count of the additional items bought? You literally just add a variable, a counter variable. You can name it anything you want. Here I named it additional item counter, and I initialized it to 0. The discount price I set it to 0.0, and this would be the new final price that will be outputting. Okay, so what changes I did here? I just first copy pasted task 2 pseudocode, and then I literally added one line in this loop inside where I'm asking for additional items, SSD or OS. I just said index additional item counter is equal to additional item counter +1. So initially it is set to 0. As soon as the user buys an SSD, it's gone to 1. And similarly, in the case of OS, it's also incremented. So if the user bought it 2 times, first it goes from 0 to 1 here, then from 1 to 2 here. And this keeps on repeating. Every time a user buys an SSD or an OS or the optical drive or whatever additional item, it keeps on incrementing. Now we have to give the discount. This I've already repeated. This would find the total price of the items, okay? So till here, this is pretty much task 1 and 2. Now we have to give the discounted price, right? How do we give the discounted price? So you have to make a simple if condition. If the additional item counter is equal to 1, that means the discount available is 5%. So here I did simple maths. You just multiply the total price with 0.05%, and then you subtract it, the discount percentage. And this gives you the discounted price, right? And you simply print the discounted price as it is. Else if the item counter is more than or equal to 2, the question clearly says if it has bought 2 or more additional items. So if that's the case, then you are to give 10% discount. So I multiply it by 0.1, and then I subtract the the total price from the discounted price, and you get the total discounted price that the user has to pay. And that's it. That's pretty much task 1, 2, 3 for all these 3 tasks of October, November. Okay. If you have any questions, you can let me know. Everything is present in this folder. The link is in the description, so you can use the pseudocode, you can use the Python code as well. And yes, that's all. Good luck for the exam, and thank you very much for watching the video.